Hey, guys, welcome to another episode of Dog Talk. I always have to start off everything I do is with thank you. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is going to be a pretty cool episode. Just to give you guys a quick hit, we're back at my home office. I got completely dressed up for everybody to celebrate the holiday season. So I went all out and decored myself up for you guys who are watching live. You can see my nice tuxedo I decided to wear for you guys. So tonight's episode is really about something that's been coming up a lot with a lot of people, which is, things that you wish you would have done differently with getting a new puppy or having a dog, right? So as always, we really want to just to take that moment and just really think back. So I want this episode to be extremely interactive between everybody that's watching live on Facebook, all over. And it's going to be important to me because I'm going to tell you some of the three top things that I feel that I screwed up when I first got into dog ownership with my first puppy or dog in general. And I would love to know some of the things that you guys maybe feel that you wish you would have went back and were able to train or wish you did differently when you first got your puppy, because I'm always looking for ways to reinnovate our training programs and get the information out to everybody to help everybody. Because again, we all might be sharing that same mistake. We might be doing those things. So I'll kick this off with one of those simple things is, as my dog got older, he started pulling the leash. So I had to then go back and retrain it. So now, years later, being a professional trainer, I've learned that one of the biggest things that you do immediately is start teaching leash training right out to the gate, getting the dog used to their weight of the leash, getting them understanding they're supposed to follow the leash. So then that way, when they get older and they're physically capable of actually pulling me, they don't, because they've been trained not to do that. So that would probably be my number one mistake, because I've personally had, since I was an adult, I've had Belgian Malinois, I've had German Shepherds. I've never had a little dog that I can essentially just, manhandle. Until recently, I got a skipper key, but since becoming a full-fledged adult in my entire life, I've had nothing but large dogs that were physically capable of ripping me down the road. And if you know me, I'm a big dude, but those dogs were strong. They were able to yank me around. So that's my number one thing, that looking back when I first got into dog training, first thing ever, the first thing I wish I would have done differently with my first dog ever was immediately getting them to understand they're supposed to follow leash pressure and not pull me down the road. Now in Blue Line Canine, obviously that's one of the first things that we teach in our online university, as well as all of our live training, is to get the dog to do these things. But that was one of those things that I know I always wish, going back on that first dog, wish I did it back then because of those things. Again, whatever you think about when you're teaching your puppy, it's really important to really emphasize the fact of not what you're looking for now, but what you want later. Okay. This is where I think the number two is for me, I think, is that we tend to get our puppies and we tend to, I think we start rushing into training tricks, sit down, roll over. And what we tend not to really pay attention to is how important it is to really emphasize what we want the dog to do in 5 years. We don't want them pulling on the leash. We want them immediately coming back when called. We want them to have a focus on us over distractions. So, this is something that I think a lot of new puppy owners make the mistake. Even old dog owners make this mistake. I've made this mistake in the past. And now, obviously, training dogs as long as I have, now I know to take my time and be patient during the beginning stages. So when you get an 8-week-old puppy to a 5 to 6 month old, you really want to emphasize and immediately start getting the dog to understand the reward system. So that is, like I said, number two is teaching the dog to really pay attention to you. And that's where I think it comes down to. It's not to focus so much on teaching them how to sit down, come and stay. It's really about teaching them that you're the reward source. So again, if you teach your dog that you're the reward source, they're going to always keep their focus in on you. And if they're keeping their focus in on you, they're not being distracted by the squirrels, the cats, the mice, the people, the kids, the bicycles, all these different things. This is something that we can really take a second and realize, is that the reward source is a key. And as your dog matures, you can really emphasize and figure out what is the reward. So Anybody that's tuning in, again, this is a live thing. You can throw your comments in the comment section. I can read them. Let me know what are some of the things that you wish you would have done differently when you brought home your puppy for the first time. What kind of training or what kind of other things? So far, we have my first two have been to make sure that my dog was learning how not to pull the leash, was the teaching them how to get used to the weight and how to keep them inside. So that's a really fun little thing to think about. The second one, like I said, is teaching the dog the reward source. A lot of people tend to skip over this and they become very corrective, telling the dog what they're not supposed to do instead of what they are supposed to do. So that's something that you can really think about with this. So one of the drills that we teach with Blue Line Canine, which if you guys are new dog owners, the fun little exercise that you can do, especially tomorrow, right? Tomorrow is going to be a pain in the butt day, as you guys have seen in Maryland. And if you're not in Maryland area, I'm sure you might be getting a winter storm. If you're not, but if you do come across one or you can't go out, the fun little exercise that you can do is teaching your dog their name. Their name drill will allow them to understand that it's a 4-point command. It's a correction, direction, recall, and a focus. So what's fun about this is that one command, so your dog's name, is going to literally mean 4 different things. So anytime you want to correct your dog, focus your dog, recall your dog, you want to use their name. Okay. If you want to bring them into you, so direction, correction, recall, and focus are your 4 points with their name. You say your dog's name. What you do is when they look at you, you're going to, yeah, boy, and they're going to immediately come running over to you. And what you can do, if you have a treat, you drop the treat on the floor. They're going to, bam, they're going to go for it. They're going to eat that treat. Now, if you have somebody else in the house, a fun little activity to do is you have another person go into another room and you repeat this drill. It becomes a fun little activity. Now, how do you know if the dog's actually learning or guessing the game? You easily figure this one out. If the dog starts progressing, meaning running into the room prior to your name calling, the drill is over and you start again a little while later. It's a fun little activity you guys can do as a family, friends, couples. It doesn't matter. You can literally go in 2 different rooms. It's a fun little way of doing things and taking advantage that you're stuck in the house while you're doing this stuff. But again, thinking about those 3 things. So we would love to hear some of your thoughts. If you guys are anything you wish, maybe we can even fix it out today. But again, number 1 was, teaching the dog not to pull on the leash, but to follow the leash. And how you do that is when you first bring your dog home, you want them to wear your leash around. So every time that the leash gets tight, they turn to it. You would say, yes, good boy or good girl. And they would come back and you would reward them. That's teaching them that they're supposed to follow that leash. And the key to this is that, remember, leaders don't look to followers. Followers look to leaders. Your dog wants to be your follower. So if you're constantly looking at your dog, you're teaching them to literally be the leader and pull away from you. So if you're going to be the leader, which you are, okay, you're the dog handler. You are the mom and dad of the family. You're the mom and the dad of the scenario. You are the leader in this. So don't be staring at your dog. What you do is you guide your leash, show the dog. Once the dog turns to look at you, yeah, good boy, or good girl. And over suddenly the dog's going to partake, come running back. You're going to reward. This is teaching the dog to face inward and not outward. If the dog's on the leash, it's going to follow the leash pressure, which is going to prevent the longevity of you and not getting pulled down the street. The second thing is teaching the reward. As you hear my high-pitched voice, right? So you can definitely hear my voice change just in a little bit. I have a nice deep baritone voice, and then all of a sudden when it's time to reward my dog, it's because I want them to know what they just did is huge to me. It's a major investment by them, and it's a major reward by me to let them know what they did is exactly what I'm looking for. So my excitement level's got to come out. It's got to match that behavior. It's got to come into them so they immediately know that they're being praised and rewarded. And where this comes from, at least for a guy like myself, is just simply as this. I have always realized that I started working 10 times harder for the yes than I ever did a no. And every time I go out with different people to work their dogs, or I just see them in general, they're always correcting. Hey, if your dog jumps on somebody, Don't tell them no. They're jumping because they've been taught to jump up is correct. Tell them to sit. Tell them what you want them to do. And in this case, if you do the name drill like I just went over with you guys, you can literally say their name. They're going to repeat. They're going to literally turn away from that person, run over to you, which is preventing the unwanted behavior. Great question. What size leash should we be using on puppies? So I recommend a 15-foot kennel loop lead. Okay. So it's either called a loop lead or a kennel lead. We sell them on our store at the bluelinecanine.com/store. We have our own custom 15-foot leashes. That's why we have them, is because we recommend them. It's a great way of teaching your dog how to respect distance, boundaries, as well as check-in points at a safe distance. So you can progress into loose leash and off leash training. So it's a good way of starting. If you're in a tight quarter where you have a lot of obstacles, then you would go to the 6-foot leash. Now, with Blue Line Canine, we highly recommend utilizing loop leads and kennel leads. We actually have our own custom ones made to prevent injuries to dogs and fast and easy use by the handlers. But these are great leashes. If you don't utilize by our store, you can go to Amazon. You can Google either kennel lead or loop lead. It'll pop up. These are great leashes because of the fact that it allows the dog to understand when you're training, when you're not, when you're going for walks and when you're not. It keeps their ID tags separated, and you allow them to wear their ID tags as jewelry, and it keeps that kind of stuff separated. The other nice thing about it is that it also prevents your dog from ever getting out to do this. So they can't slip the leash, they can't get out, they can't pull backwards and get off of or any of those things. So it's a great little thing to do for something like that. Yes, you can do this with older dogs. So it doesn't matter the age of dogs. That's actually a great little comment. I've used it 3 times today. So that's a great question to bring up, is can we do this with older dogs? So the answer to that one is really simply is yes. So there's an old saying that says you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And what's funny about that is that only is referring to people. People are so stubborn in their old age that it becomes very difficult to train them, and you become frustrated and walk away. With dogs, you have to think about it along the lines of, is you can change anything you've taught any dog, no matter what the age is. It just goes by understanding that the older the dog, the longer it's going to take in the repetitiveness. So a couple of things to think about would be, is it takes 30 days to create a habit, 60 days to enforce, 90 days for muscle memory. And what you're really thinking about is that means you have to repeat this action over and over and over again for that timeline before you really start to see a major difference and it's impacted into habits. Now, when you think of the older dog, for example, if the older dog has been pulling on a leash for 5 years, it's not going to be solved in one walk. It might take you 10 to 15 walks, where that 6-7 month old puppy is only going to take you 1 or 2 different walks to understand what you're doing. Same thing with the reward source. If you are teaching your dog that every time you say the word yes, you're dropping a treat on the floor, for the puppy, they're going to figure out extremely quick, because of the fact there's no bad habits that they have to unlearn to relearn this. As your older dog is going to sit there and say, well, I'm going to get a meal later, so I don't really need to do anything for that. So you're going to have a little bit more of a struggle just because of the fact that they're older. I remember as a kid when I was first learning this kind of things, there was an analogy said to me, which is probably the greatest analogy, which was actually from Darren Hardy. So it's a really good one, is if a gentleman asked you to go out and rip a sapling out of the ground, you could pretty much do it with no problem. So a baby little tree, boom, rip it out of your hand. If the tree is 3 to 5 years old, you would have to go over there and you would have to use some work, really put some elbow grease into it. But if that tree is 20 years old, you're probably going to need some tools to get that tree out of the ground. And I know I didn't say it directly the way he did it, but that's just the analogy of it. And when you think about training an older dog, just remember, you're going to need to bring what's necessary into this case. And we're not talking about tools, but we're talking about patience and repetitiveness. You can teach anybody anything. So I really would love to find out some of your guys' thoughts on what you wish would be different before I release number 3 of my own. So if you guys are thinking about what you would do differently, or what you wish you did differently when you first got your dog, or if you just got your dog now, what are some things that you might be interested in knowing or considering since you just got it? So we would love to hear some feedback here, as we have 15 minutes left of the show. So if you guys can, feel free to throw a comment up there about what you wish you did differently. Hey, do you wish you would have gotten to a puppy class sooner? Do you wish you would have done some things? Do you have drills to train dogs around puppies and infants? Yes. So a few things to think about. One is So are they in, so a good question I have to ask, because I have to know where to start with this. So every age of children has a different element of change and drills that you would have to do. One would be is one of the big things would be is, so for example, if you have a car seat, a lot of times what I would do is we would sit there and we would bring, so me and my wife would bring our kids home. Prior to my kids being born, I used to walk into the house with a car seat, and what I would do is I'd bring my groceries in the car seat, and I would walk around with the car seat, and I would give the car seat a lot of attention by moving things around my house with it. And that way my dogs become extremely desensitized to it. So when I knew that my kids were going to be in it, obviously when I was bringing them home from the hospital, my dogs actually didn't care as much. Something that was really funny about when my kids were born is I used to like be sitting on a couch and then randomly just jump up and run to the kids' room and then go back and just, go back to watching television. I did this so often before my kids were home from the hospital or even born that they became extremely desensitized to the behaviors that I knew I was going to be doing. Now you're saying, well, that doesn't really help me. My kids are already here. How do I do this? Well, a couple of things that you can do would, one be is you can walk in and around with a car seat, and that way the car seat becomes desensitized because you're showing a lot of attention and dogs will start to ignore it. The next big thing is showing boundaries. So you can teach your dog how to place where you do little drills and involve your children. I know one of the things that I really did with my kids when they were babies, my dogs were protection dogs, law enforcement canines at the time when they were really, really young, is I would hold them while I fed my dogs. So that way my dogs started to realize that my kids were a part of the feeding and a part of the hierarchy. So that was a nice little thing. Art, I would also suggest, if you give me a little bit more information, exactly what you're looking for, I can definitely give you some drills to put you where you need to be, or you could feel free to send me an email at msolar@bluelinek-9.com, and I will happily give you some tips and tricks on how to solve that, and then we can share it later, making sure we answer those directly. The next one was, so one of the big ones that somebody put up here is, I wish I never gave my beagle table food. So giving your dog table foods is a neat thing, because it matters really where you come from with the table food. So for example, like if you're feeding him from your table, obviously you just you're training your dog to beg every time you have food. I normally suggest to people is that you feed your dogs at the same time you're going to eat dinner. So then that way they're getting used to that everybody eats at the same time. And that's one of the biggest things that you can ever put into the scenario. So you're showing them that you're in control of it. And it's also allowing you to have your peaceful meal and their peaceful meal. That way they can eat while you're eating, and you don't have to worry about the begging. You don't have to worry about those problems. So that's an easy means of changing that behavior. If you're going to give your dog table scraps, I normally suggest you put it in their bowl. I'm not going to sit here and tell people that you shouldn't or things like that, because the truth be told is we're all individuals and we can make up our own minds and choices. So I'd like to normally tell people is that you should do those kinds of things, and that's really where you want to look at that, if that makes sense. You want to go ahead and put the table scraps so that way the dog knows what's in the bowl is theirs and what's not in the bowl is not. So it's a real simple way of doing that one. I'm going to read some of these comments here. So another one is, I wish I took the time in the beginning and wasn't too eager to throw through all the commands and realize later down the road that Kip didn't actually know some of the commands fully. So that's a really good point, is when you really start to think of that kind of stuff, you want to match up those things where you want to proof your commands, and you can proof your commands in many different ways. But the most important way of proofing your commands is, number one, is making sure your dog knows you're the reward source. That's number one. Number two, changing environments and verifying. You can turn your back, you can change it, you could push your dog to different locations, things like that. So that's a really good point of bringing up that she did, is saying, like, is a regretful point, is because a lot of times we get so zoomed in to teaching all these different tricks, shake, roll over, that we didn't take the time to really make sure that our dogs actually knew the commands individually. And a lot of times where we see that is if you hold up a treat in front of your dog, they a lot of times tend to go right through an entire routine of commands and not truly pay attention. And when that happens is really where we start to fall victim. Does that make sense? And that's really what comes to bite us in the butt. So we want to make sure that each one of our commands is individually paid to our dog, individually ended, and that way we know they're paying attention. So that's a really good one to come up with. And I would honestly say, I mean, that can definitely be in one of my top threes. I remember I did the same thing with my first dog, where I zipped through a ton of commands and then realized I didn't even teach my dog to listen to my initial command, if you're following me on that one. So that's something to think about. Okay. I got you, Art. We'll hit you up later. We'll give you direct commands to make sure you're following through with those things, Art. So don't worry about it. We're gonna we're gonna get you taken care of directly. So we'll give you a shout out tomorrow if that's okay, and we're gonna hit you up with the direct drills to make sure they fit directly into your lifestyle. Okay. So that way you can do it, because you just got your new baby. So congratulations on that. So we're going to help you out with that one. So we'll give you a call tomorrow. We'll give you some direct hints over there. Okay. So as we get ready to close up the show, I have to say what number 3 is of mine. So my top one was to teach my dog understanding the leash pressure and the weight of the leash. So as I got older with my first dog, I wouldn't have had him pulling down the road. The second one was teaching my dog that I was the leader and the reward source. That was the second one, my first major mistake that I believe I made. And my biggest mistake I think I ever made was having no idea what I was actually training my dog to do. Number 3, that has to be the biggest mistake I made with my first dog ever, because every 3 to 4 months, I would literally change everything I was doing with my dog. He became his name was Bruno. If you ever see the Blue Line Canine logo, it was his shadow. That was the photograph. That's what is the silhouette on there. He was a phenomenal dog, but he has gone through so much training when he was alive. He went through so much stuff because we had no idea what I was doing with him, from sporting events to attempted service dog training to scent work to law enforcement to you name it. That dog went through every boot camp in the world his entire life up until the moment we retired him. He was a great dog, but that was probably the biggest regret. And ever since then, every dog that I've gotten past after that, I knew exactly what they were going to be. Were they going to be a family dog? Were they going to be a sport dog? Were they going to be an agility dog? Were they going to be a service dog? Because it allowed me to know the exact curriculum from beginning to end. I knew what they wanted and what I wanted to do with my dog when they became an adult, when they were prime. So that allowed me to find out the rules that I needed to follow. You know, it's just like this. One big complaint we get all the time in dog training is housebreaking and dogs having accidents in their houses. And one of the big questions I always ask is simply this: why did you put wee-wee pads down? That literally teaches the dog to go to the bathroom in the house. When you bring home a new puppy, your dog is going to have to go to the bathroom every 30 to 40 minutes, bar none. That's the minimum requirement. They will have to go to the bathroom every 30 to 40 minutes. So set a timer and bring your dog outside. Also, don't leave water out all day for a new puppy. They're going to drink it, and when they drink it, they're going to have to go to the bathroom. So how do you solve these problems? Is very, very simple. You know that you don't want your dog going to the bathroom in the house, because I know I do not. So I'm not going to teach him to do that. What I'm going to do is very simple, is that we are going to sit there and we are going to simply teach a dog that we're going to take him outside and we're going to let him go to the bathroom in the same spot that teaches him that nice routine. And every week I'm going to add that timer to get longer and longer, teaching them and allowing them to build up the muscle to hold onto their bowels. That's going to be the step that you really want to take. So remember, when we're working with our dogs and we're having problems, we want to not only solve the problem for today, but we want to solve the problem for the future. So going back to my top 3 was 1, getting my dog to pay attention to leash pressure and making sure they understand what the leash meant. Number 2 is teaching them the high level reward source. And number 3 is knowing exactly where I'm starting with training by knowing where I want it to end in my training. Those are my top 3. So those are the big things that we want to look at. So Dawn Little asks a question I've picked before. Would it be best to talk to the trainer to know what breed would be best for a service dog? I've narrowed it down to a German Shepherd in a lab. Perfect. But then you don't get genetics qualifying. Okay, so Dawn, we've been blessed with a young lady named Savannah. She actually just put a comment below yours. She is our service dog trainer here at Blue Line Canine. And what I would do for you, Dawn, is if you want, you could send me an email or a message. I will have Savannah with your phone number. I will have Savannah reach out to you, give you a quick talk. She can answer any questions you have in reference to service dogs. I am not an expert in service dogs, but one thing I can tell you is Savannah will be a guest on this show. So I'm going to put a little bit build up into January, February time to make sure that we get anybody looking for service dog questions, Q&A, what the laws are, what the rules are, where the training should start, what all that kind of stuff. Where Savannah and I will be working together in the next couple of weeks to prep for this show. I look forward to having her on. She's been a true plus addition to this company, and she's going to be a huge asset to everybody that's looking for this stuff. I know every time she tells me something, it blows my mind, and it's not often that I get stumped, but she has stumped me a few times with some rules and regulations that I wasn't even aware of. So power to her. And I can't wait to have her on the show and let you guys all meet her. So that's going to happen here in the next week. My goal for 2021, in case you guys were not knowing, is to have every one of my staff members on this show and getting everybody to used to you and see why and what makes them so awesome. Because the truth be told is Blue Line Canine, this entire company wouldn't exist without any of them. It's what it's all about. And on top of that, you guys make it what it is. And is that special. Art, we will be in contact with you tomorrow to give you one-on-one tips to help you guys out. Enjoy your night, everybody. And we'll talk to you next week. And if you tune in next week, I think I'm going to dress up like Santa and probably come up with some giveaways for the holidays. What do you guys think? If you think that's a good idea, go ahead, subscribe us at blk9tv.com. I will do that. I will come up with some specials. Hit us up with some ideas. Let me know what we can do to give away for the new year to bring in 2021 as best we can. All right, guys, we'll talk to you all next week.